What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is an innovative leader who uses her talented mind to create beautiful spaces. She's NCIDQ certified. She's incredibly skilled at interior design and running teams across many different time zones. She is a principal and U.S. managing director at DesignAgency. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexandra Cole. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Dan.
It's so good to have you here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Well,
in this virtual bubble you've created.
Well, virtual bubble, but we're also going to we just saw each other and we're going to get to see each other again. And I feel like that's a really cool thing about you. I think that you are always putting yourself out there and making yourself available, trying to make as many connections with people as possible. At least that's like when I really think about the Alex I know. It's just amazing and inspiring how I see you everywhere. And I don't know, you kind of help make me be a better connector in some kind of a way, if that makes sense.
Well, that's very nice of you to say, Dan. I do have a special connection. You know, I am omnipresent. I am in all places at all times.
I do. It's like in the book Dune, or I don't know if you saw the movie Dune, but there's this idea of the Kwisatz Haderach, who is Paul Muad'Dib. This is my science fiction geek coming out, but he is able to fold space by eating and eating spice, and he can be in all places at once. Did I just geek you out there? Did I just scare you a little bit?
Just a little bit, just a tad.
Right. Well, another cool thing that I think a really great moment for us as far as on our journey together is, I don't remember where we were. I think we might have been at some HD Expo, and I was just like, oh, there's something in my teeth. And you're like, oh, I have dental floss. And you pulled a thing of dental floss out of your purse. I was like, wow, you are amazing. Not only are you in all places at all times, but you're also very handy to have around.
Well, thank you. I try to be prepared as much as I can, no matter where I am, at all times and at all places. But I love that you still remember that story and oftentimes introduce me as the girl that has dental floss. I'm not sure I'm quite as prepared these days, but yes, I've gotten out of practice, you know, being on the road all the time.
I know. Well, on the road all the time, but also working in something that you're super passionate about, obviously, which is design, creating built environments around hospitality. Like, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but actually, I know I've never asked you this. So when it comes to design and living in your creative self, right? When did you come to know that part of yourself?
Probably at a really early age. My mom was always redoing our house as a child when we were growing up, and things were always moving around. Furniture was always being placed in different parts of the house. And so I kind of think I was exposed to it at a very early age. And ironically, I've married a man who's very much like that. So every time I go on a business trip, I come home and something has moved around our house, which is slightly triggering. But
I share that. By the way, I share that with you. My wife, Alexa, she is always moving stuff around and just always tinkering and trying to find the perfect solution for whatever is there. And it's also, I find it very unsettling because I like things to be put. I like things to be in a place, but she is always reinventing and recreating, which is also, it's not my thing, but it makes her really happy. So it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. It's also kind of that sense of when you're coming home after being away for a long time, you want to come to a place that is settled and something that's familiar. And when you walk in the door and the whole living room's been rearranged, it's kind of like, well, this isn't my home that I left a week ago, or what have you, but it is what it is. We're moving through it. But again, it's something that like I grew up with, so it's not completely foreign to me. I also am dyslexic, so I knew I had to think of something to be a little bit more creative. And I have that sense in me and I always have since a young child. And so I actually took an interior design class in high school. It was offered as like an elective, and I can still remember doing like 1-point and 2-point perspectives there. And so then when I went to college, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I only applied to colleges that had interior design programs. And so I really sought out that kind of class of study and kind of went from there. So it is something I did know at an early age for sure. And it is something that I have a great passion for. Even in the days that are a little bit more stressful or a little bit more wound tight, people always were like, well, what else would you do if it wasn't design? And I can truly say that there isn't really anything else I would do. I think I really have a passion for this field and for this industry, no matter how many headaches, aneurysms, et cetera, that it may cause along the way.
So, I mean, well, thank you. I didn't know that you were dyslexic as well. And I just had a recent conversation with Vito from Hilton, where he also shared that he was dyslexic. And now I'm wondering how many people that have been on the show and just other designers that are out there, how many of them have learning differences, and how many, because to be able to see things in a non-linear way, to be able to see a 3D space and turn it upside down and think about things in a different way. I'm curious as to, like, when you said when your mom was moving everything around when you were little, that time, or how did you, because that can also be a real point of stress in a normal learning environment as well, right? So when did you become aware of that dyslexia, and how did you find the outlet to taking design classes, and did that like soothe you or make you feel comfortable in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I knew at a very early age, it was definitely part of my education from third grade on. And I think, when you're dyslexic, learning, like reading and writing is not fun or enjoyable. So to get through school, especially at the elementary, high school, middle school times, you have to find something else that's going to stimulate you and kind of keep you engaged. And so I think that's kind of when I started looking at more of the creative arts as something that, throughout a school day from 8 to 3 or whatever it is, was something that I could look forward to. And funnily enough, in college, that kind of transcended. Instead of, you have to take your core classes, which are fine. And then I had my interior design classes. And like a good Auburn University student, I was there for 5 years. And so I had some extra time. And so in college, that kind of like outlet outside of interior design became different sports, and really picking up kind of, as I call them, the country club sports. So, golf, tennis, sailing, things to, get outside of the classroom, because writing more papers was not going to be the electives that I chose.
And on your journey, you've worked at a handful of different places. You're in a leadership role now, right? So you're bringing up the next generation of leaders. Are you really open with them about learning differences, or like kind of like where your specialty is, or do people like open up to you about that so that you can help kind of mentor them on their journeys as well? I'm curious about that.
I'm not. I'm open to talking to them. I think anyone that's gotten an email or a quick, especially internally, quick like message probably has picked up on it over time, especially like the informal, banter back and forth. But no, it's not something that I would say that I wear with pride. I do wear with pride, but I'm not like, but I am definitely open to it. I think this day and age, we just have to, inclusivity and like embracing everybody in all different shapes, sizes, colors, and differences, I think is really important. And so I would definitely, I'm not ashamed of it by any means, but it's not something that I discuss every day, I guess.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me, just, if you go back 20 or 30 years, like back when I was a kid, it was almost, these learning differences were, I don't know, they weren't as celebrated as they are now, because, and in many cases, they're still not, because if you are a kid who learns differently, there's so, like, you're so blessed and lucky that you found design and the creative arts as an outlet, right? How many kids just don't get diagnosed, they don't know, and then they just wind up hating school and learning, and they're never actually able to find kind of their passion and what drives them, or maybe they are at some point, but it's not really something that they learn at a young age.
For sure, definitely.
I also, going back to your husband moving the furniture around, and my wife who does that as well. I would think that you would be the one that would be moving the furniture around as a designer, right? So are you kind of like me with, like, if you come into our house, I do custom furniture for hotels, right? I supply furniture to hotels. I could have every kind of custom, perfectly bespoke built piece of furniture in my house that just is perfect, but I'm like, I can't deal with it for myself. I love doing it for others, but I can't deal with it for myself. So it's like, I always come up with this metaphor of, I'm like the shoemaker's kids who have no shoes, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So you're like the designer who doesn't like to move things around in her own house.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have opinions and I move things around. I think I'm not all designers, but I've, moved around a fair bit already in my adult life, and I haven't found the perfect home yet. So it's kind of like the amount of energy you want to spend into creating and perfecting your home environment. And so at this point, I haven't spent a ton of time on it. My husband definitely thinks that he's the designer in our household for sure.
Awesome. So I want to go back into like feeling. So before third grade or up until third grade, you're going through your learning. Like, I assume you're feeling frustrated through all just the normal coursework you're going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't know what it is. And then when you had a name for, or when you had the name dyslexia for what the thing was, and then you found an outlet and expanded that outlet into the creative arts, how did you feel from a before to after?
It's a great question. You're asking me to go way back in the time machine here, Dan, today, really getting in touch with that inner child inside. I think, there's a part of my learning experience as a child too, of like being pulled out of classrooms a lot and having, a lot of more dedicated one-on-one time that I can think of, that also like helped build confidence in myself, because I had that support and that dedicated time with teachers outside of the classroom. And so I kind of think that, that skill and that reinforcement of like, you can be successful and you can do hard things has definitely carried through into my professional life, and also, into the creative side of what I've accomplished thus far. And so I think that kind of helped, form the person that I am today. I think that answers your question.
No, it totally
is that
answers
direction you're going?
No,
yeah,
it's totally the direction, because I know you said like getting in touch with your inner child, and like, I'm not a psychologist, right? But to me, the inner child is really that emotional self, right? That's where your emotional self is birthed, so to speak. And then if you think about what this podcast is all about, like defining hospitality, in so many of these conversations, it's about how how to make others feel, right? And I don't want to lead you too much on it, but I think that's what's really cool about all these conversations that I'm having is like everyone seems to be, if there was a scale of empathy, like they're like off of it, they're like beyond the highest in on the empathetic emotional whatever that spectrum would be. So so just to ask you, like when you think about so okay, you found this passion for design, creativity, you could do anything with that really, but you've chosen hospitality to design spaces for hospitality. Like, how do you think about hospitality? Like, how do you define hospitality?
Well, I think it's really kind of about that feeling of welcoming and acceptance and kind of, you know, the coming together of experiences and people. I think that, you know, there's a few things that like pop to my mind, like scenarios that like just exude kind of hospitality and warm welcome, whether that's, you know, a big wraparound front porch or, you know, a warm bubbling fire with, you know, big comfy sofas and armchairs around it with a hot drink in your hand. I think there's just different experiences and moments in life where you really have that feeling of hospitality. But I really think that it's kind of this overarching feeling of, you know, arriving somewhere and feeling like you belong and having that sense of like warmth and welcome to a place or a venue or a hotel or your friend's home, your family's home.
Yeah, you know, as you're saying that, I'm hearing like the wraparound front porch, like sinking into a big couch by a fire and with a hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really a feeling of comfort. It's very soothing, right? And then so as you've gone on your journey into design and then into designing spaces for hospitality or giving or receiving hospitality, like what are some ways that you and your teams think about that filter of warmth and care that can exude these feelings? Like you, like, are there, like, you have a new team, like you hired someone new, they're working with you, they're doing their first board and like laying everything out. How do you give feedback or critique on, ooh, you know, that, how do we warm that up, or how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think what we really try to emulate to our staff at Design Agency and how we really like to think about design is having our designs all based on a really strong narrative. And so, and that's not, that narrative isn't just like geometric, contrast, layered. It's more about kind of telling the story of the place. It's that underlying kind of storyline that you want when you walk away from a space to be able to tell the staff, like, this is what we were thinking and feeling when we were creating this restaurant, this hotel, and kind of leaving that soundbite with them is really important to us, because then they can be a part of that story and a part of that narrative, and they can help carry that through with all the guests and all the people that experience that space moving forward. So I think that that's kind of really important to us and how we design these spaces. I think it's important to think about, you know, arrival, a sense of arrival. When we go through design, we always think about that one. That's always one of, we kind of break things down by areas, and arrival is almost always one of those, because no matter what type of space you're in, you have to enter it in some way. And so what is that first impression? How do you feel? What is the vestibule look like? What are the materials? What's the carpet? What's the ceiling? Is it all metal? Like, kind of having that thought through, because that is every guest, every person that's experiencing first impression of the space and what's going to occur within that space.
Thank you. Because as you were talking, I'm just hearing you, like, I love the idea of narrative and storytelling, right? Because you can almost bring people on a journey through that story, whether they are aware of it or not. Like,
Right.
they're not aware of it, they're going through it and they're experiencing something. I noticed, like, a couple of years ago, I guess with the rise of Instagram, there's always this Instagrammable moment, which I think became like very contrived very quickly to create like a narrative in like a little pocket. It was like too abrupt. You know what I mean?
Right.
How
And it's very isolating. It's very like, are we designing spaces where in just one corner, this space looks good, or in just one corner, we want people to take pictures, and everywhere else, well, we'll just see what happens.
Totally. It's just, I understand why it happened. I still feel like there's it's still there. And even though it's moving away from that, there's like still vestiges of that. Like, I don't know, like,
it's called PR and marketing, Dan.
PR and marketing, right? But how do you smooth out that contrast between that moment and that also that narrative and sense of arrival? Like, do you look at things and be like, oh, that's that, or I don't want to lead you. Like, how do you look at that abruptness when it happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think most designers would agree that the Instagrammable moment is one of those like faux pas things that, you know, it's right up there with reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs of a moment.
Shiplap.
Yes, exactly. But I think you know, and you're right, it still is part of what is being asked of us as designers at times. But I think that, you know, especially in the hospitality field, in hotels where you have these grand lobbies, I think it's interesting to see, you know, the lobbies and the designs that are being most acclaimed, and the ones that are, you know, praised are the ones that are completely like are complete in their narrative, where it's not just in a corner, but it's carried throughout the space. And I think that transcends into service and how you operate spaces as well. And it also goes into kind of the branding and creative services of, you know, if you have a beautiful lobby bar with a lounge, what is on the table when you sit down next to the bar? Is there a beautiful kind of menu, or even just a coaster where you put your glass? Like what is there? And it's kind of taking that narrative and that complete design thought and carrying it throughout the entire space. So it's not just in that one Instagrammable moment. It's great to see a lobby photographed like in social media from different angles. You know, that's when you know that the Instagrammable moment has been transcended.
So Alex, like, thinking about this idea of arrival and storytelling, right? And creating that sense of warmth, but not being an Instagrammable moment, creating this, like, that lobby space that looks good from all different directions, like you said. Can you think of a project that you've done, or one that like inspires you specifically on the actual arrival into the lobby of a hotel or restaurant or resort, that you think just really nails it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have kind of our designers that we admire and inspire. I think that there are some out there that are really good. I think Ennismore and all the Hoxtons, really, you know, when you're arriving into a Hoxton, no matter what city you're in, I think they do a really good job at that arrival kind of sequence. David Collins is a designer, was a designer outside in London that I've really admired, and he has a really wonderful sense of kind of that residential feeling into larger hospitality environments, as well as like a great eye for design, like details, and kind of creating down to those details that you would see in a home. And so I think that that he and his projects really are some of the best. The Connaught Bar in London is wonderful.
Oh, I love that place.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of good things, a lot of good examples of that kind of out there. There's, some great hotels that are opening in New York right now, that are also doing that. The new Ritz in Nomad seems to be very popular. And again, from that sense of going from an Instagrammable moment to full thought, you can already tell. I haven't seen that yet, but you can already tell that that was a very thought out kind of design throughout the entire space.
I love it. I've seen a lot of the pictures of the Ritz. My office used to be
Right across the
right
street.
like right next to it. But I'm very excited to get in there and experience what that's all about. As you like everyone in our industry and the world, like we've all been through whatever we've been through in the past year and a half or 2 years. As you think about the future, short term, long term, what's exciting you most?
Short term, I'm excited to get back on the road. To your first intro of me, I don't feel like I've been very omnipresent over the last couple of years. And I know we're going to see each other next week. And I was talking to a good friend of ours, Miss Aliya Khan, this morning, and I was telling her,
the great Khan.
Yes, I was telling her I was feeling off of my travel circuit, and she reminded me that we have all been off of our travel circuit. But that's kind of really inspiring and something that I'm looking forward to in the short term. I think traveling again for work is great, but I also think leisure. I'm really, really gunning for a big European vacation, summer of 2023. Haven't been to Europe in quite some time. So I think that, just getting back out there and being in different environments that are inspiring and, keep the design juices and the creativity within me alive, or something like that's very exciting now that we're getting back into it. I think long term, we should remember this moment in time. And I think we will. I think it's been interesting to think about from the early days of COVID and how everyone was super germ cautious. And, I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing in hospitality spaces, but how do you do that creatively and, inclusive of the overall design, and not just have, your pump of hand sanitizer slammed on the front desk there. But kind of just, it's a good reminder that we are a global reach, the things that we do, the places that we design, and that, we have people from all over coming to these places, and, just kind of thinking more inclusive and, expanding the breadth of that, those designs, I think is really important.
You know what I'm really excited about? And you just said it with breath. I'm just excited to be back in these big rooms full of people breathing each other's air.
Are you?
I love it.
Really?
Yes.
Those big ballrooms?
Yes. Airplanes, ballrooms. Although I will say, I do still wear a mask on airplanes on longer flights.
I do too.
But on a longer flight, like a red eye, I'm wearing masks. But what I find is, and I don't know if this is scientifically proven or not, it's probably just me. I find myself less tired or less dehydrated if I wear a mask, because somehow it like keeps all that recirculating air and moisture in my
That might be TMI, Dan.
In my world. Yeah. I was told that we should really only use the word moist when talking about
Oh
baking or
my
something
goodness.
else. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Anyway, yes, I'm still wearing a mask on planes too. I don't know. I feel like that might be something that might stick with us for a minute. I don't know. It's just seems like the thing to do. You don't know where all these people from on this plane are coming from. I don't know. It's
mm,
also becoming flu season. But, we're getting there.
right. Now just by talking about this, we're probably going to get some like
Stop it.
COVID stamp on Spotify put on this on this conversation. Uh, so design agency, Toronto based, you guys are growing. Like you obviously people were on a growth path before the pandemic. I feel like you guys continued with a lot of that growth as far as offices and people even through the pandemic. I know that everyone did have to retract, but like where are you guys on growth and office locations now, and kind of what's exciting you most about design agency?
Yeah. We were very fortunate to have an okay COVID experience. We definitely had some bumps in the road, and there were a few months there that it was a little bit tricky and touch and go, just like everyone else. But I think we have really been able to come out of it on the other side for sure. We are Toronto based, and our office there has grown both in numbers of staff, but also space. And kind of, part of that is also what is the new workplace and what does that look like specifically for the design world, where, we're not requiring our staff to come in every week or every day rather. And so yes, we've grown there, but we've also grown, we opened our DC office, one of the ones that I manage, March of 2020, which
I
is a
remember.
great time to open an office. So that was a little touch and go there for a little bit, but we've definitely been able to grow that office pretty significantly, I would say, in the last 12 to 18 months. Kind of coming out on the other side of COVID, as well as our LA office. We have about 8 people there. And then we've also, like, very organically, by no one's design, have kind of created a little bit of a cluster of people in Denver, which I think was one of the most interesting things about COVID and this whole remote working, is that all of a sudden, I think this applies globally, that we're all kind of more open to this. What does it mean to be a remote worker? And how does that expand your office? And so we have a few folks in Denver as well who work with the LA office, who work with the DC office, who work with the Toronto office. So that's been super exciting. And then we also have a pretty strong contingent over in Europe. So we've really grown that office as well over COVID.
Where in Europe? I didn't know that. I guess I'm a bad researcher.
The main European office is based out of Barcelona.
Oh,
But
great.
just like what's kind of happened in the States with Denver, we also have kind of a cohort in the UK as well, a few people there. So we have almost close to 20 people in Europe. I'm approaching my 6-year anniversary with Design Agency next week, actually, I think. And when I started, I was employee number 37, and we're now well over 110. So
Wow.
we're definitely growing, and it's very exciting to do so and be a part of that for sure and help in that.
And of all the offices that you have and the types of projects, like, what are the range of projects as far as like hospitality, office, residential? Like how does it all mix up in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a wide variety. I think if any COVID taught us anything, we should all have a good diversity of our projects. And so we have all types of project shapes, sizes, budgets, and scales. So I think, we're getting back to a pretty, even divide, I think, between hospitality projects and more of the multifamily projects. I think what's becoming really interesting and a trend that's been happening for a few years now is the hospitality elements and design philosophy transferring into different market segments. And so we have, we're starting to see that more and more in our multifamily projects. We have a fair amount of work in the Miami market, which right now is kind of having this growing popularity, if you will, of branded residential. And so having kind of, I think there's, all types of different branded condo buildings in Miami. And we are also working on one of those at the moment with the Nomad team. And so it's just very interesting to kind of see how, though there are these different market segments, they kind of eventually kind of all overlap and cross paths and to the hospitality world. That's what everybody wants to have in an experience.
Yeah. And just in talking to some people that work for like super huge firms, what's been illuminating to me through these conversations is how many of them are, there could be a project that's doing aviation or industrial or whatever that's not hospitality, but they're bringing in their hospitality people at a project kickoff to really like look at everything through
For sure.
whatever that hospitality lens might be.
For sure. For sure. I think that's definitely something that we're also seeing in what we're doing as well. I think, co-working and just cultural gatherings places and office environments are also kind of seeing all of that, hospitality, cross section between the different markets as well.
I know you mentioned earlier we're going to see each other next week at ILC, Independent Lodging Congress, and I asked this of Daniel Del Olmo. Look, we all go to so many conferences, right?
Yes.
And they're all good in their own ways. Like I think I get a lot out of each of them, but there's something about ILC which I really just enjoy so much. And I know that you've been an early supporter of ILC. Like, what do you love most about ILC?
That's a great question. And it's changed over time for sure. I definitely was one of the more early adapters, I guess, to that. And I think that the group of people has enlarged and is probably even more diverse than it was. I think what Andrew does really well is bringing in people that you and I probably don't see or cross paths with in our travels or daily lives, and kind of bringing in some different industry thought leaders that are maybe outside of what you would think are your typical hospitality hotels operator kind of bubble. So I think that that's really interesting. I also think that there's just like a casual and fun flavor to what ILC does. I remember the first one I ever went to, we had a cocktail making like team building contest with the table you were sitting at.
Really?
So yeah. So I think it's different, I guess I would say, is what attracts me to it. Different in the population and how it's run as well.
Yeah.
I won't say it's one of my favorites. I have others.
No, there are, we can all have favorite. I'm not saying, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think they all have their own kind of just strengths. But what I think what I really enjoy about it too is just all these, like much in the same way that these larger firms are bringing this hospitality lens to look at everything, because it kind of touches everything. Everything outside of hospitality also touches hospitality. So it's just nice to, get in artists or writers or chefs or like all these other things that might
Fragrance
not,
chemist or
fragrance.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And because it all informs this sense of kind of empathy and how we make others feel, right?
Right.
And then I also, in the casualness, I also like the conversations that happen amongst the attendees is really freaking cool too, because, you know, you can have some really open, honest, and like, quite frankly, difficult conversations that it's like a very safe place to kind of push the envelope of curiosity, if you will.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So when earlier, when we first started the conversation, you were in third grade. There's how old are you when you're in third gride? 10? No, 8, 7 or 6, 7. Let's just go with 7. Yeah, I know. It's a blur for me. There's too many of them. Let's say you're 7. So when I think of the 7-year-old Alex, I'm envisioning, do you know that statue of the of that little girl outside the stock exchange?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's picture that's you, that statue there in front of the stock exchange.
Okay.
That's the 7-year-old you, and you're walking up to, but it's not inanimate. She's real, but it's you, and you are walking up to the 7-year-old version of yourself on Wall Street. What advice do you have for yourself?
It's a great question, Dan. Buckle up. It's going to be a ride. I mean, I think take every challenge and go with it. I mean, I think I've had a lot of unique growing experiences in my lifetime, personal, career, all of the above. And I think that, you know, that creates the person that you are. And so, yeah, to my 7-year-old self, I would say, buckle up. It's going to be one.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what else I find that's really cool about that? It's also buckle up, because it's not like you're fighting the journey, right? It's like, buckle up, you're on the journey, and just like embrace it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't change anything about any of my life experiences, I don't think, today, but yeah, I think it makes you, again, everything that each one of us experiences, all of our personal, you know, experiences through life make us who we are, and, you know, form us into being the people that we are. Some of them have been easier than others, some of them have been more challenging, but I think that, yeah, it's definitely been a ride so far in life, my very young life.
Yes. One other thing I wanted to touch on, and you brought it up not too long ago, was this idea of branded residential. If you were to, like, right now, if you were to look at, let's just say you were doing 100 proposals for projects out there, what % of those are in this branded residential space? And like, if you were to like look into the future, how many more of these projects are there? Are we just at the very early stage, or is this like an experiment, or do you see this like growing in a massive way? And who's staying in them?
Right. How many of the proposals that we're putting out there are that probably not too many. I think it's still a little bit of a unique niche market. I think that it is something, obviously, that a lot of different brands, whether it's a hotel brand, a car brand, a jewelry brand, I think Tiffany's has a branded residential now. I think it's an interesting, like, cult following tactic. You know, if you're really love your, you know, super nice car, or you really love staying in an XYZ or hotel type of hotel, that's an interesting model to have these branded residential opportunities. But I also think, you know, especially coming out of COVID, it's been an area that can make money, and there's a return on that. So I think it's probably not here. I think it's here for the long haul. It will be interesting to see how it develops over time, and if the one-off, I'm just making guesses here. I can't think of all of the different branded, but let's say if like the one-off Bentley Residences, like, is it just that one-off, or are there going to be more? I think that's still time will tell. But I do think kind of having even the residential that we're doing, either condos or rentals, I think are becoming more sophisticated. In the sense that, even if they're not tied to a brand, whether it be, a luxury brand or whatever, that those buildings and the design of those buildings are still becoming, again, more hospitality driven, and more, how do I get my rental building in Coral Gables, or my rental building in Washington, D.C., or Denver, or San Francisco to stand out among the others. And even if it's not branded, it's how do I have the, you have all these amenity spaces in multifamilies, like, but do people actually use them? And how do you get people to use them? What about your building's amenities attract people to either buy within your building or to have renters within your building? So I think it's kind of an evolution of creating more interesting places in which we live. And if anything, during COVID, I think we've all examined the four walls that we live in, no matter if it's a standalone house or a apartment or a condo, a little bit more. And so I think that that's kind of where we're going in that kind of segment of design.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by it too, because if you think about hospitality, or not even hospital, if you think about a brand, right? And then you can tie all those small moments that you mentioned before, from scent to the coaster to the sense of arrival at each place. And if you think of like a retail product and an immersive brand experience, it's like the ultimate, because you can have a person basically living in your brand, right? From a marketing and experiential perspective, that's really cool. I don't know why it hasn't caught on more. And then on the residential side, are you also doing all of the so you have all the different public spaces but what about within the apartments? Are you doing like all the FF&E for those of you who don't know, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment in the, is it like a fully furnished apartment, or is it dealer's choice at that point? Or is it an option?
Completely dependent, I think, on the project, the owner, and the location. We have a lot of work in Miami right now in the multifamily sector, and we have a mix within that market of whether or not we're doing units, interiors, and whether or not they're furnished or not furnished. Miami is a little bit of an interesting market in the sense that it is kind of an investment market. And, to fight the Airbnbs and whatever of, the hotel to Airbnb conversation, Miami's condo market is also entering into that kind of game there, because they do sell condos that are fully furnished and people buy them as investments, but then they kind of go into a rental pool. So it's like
that's
an
cool.
additional kind of, I don't know, barrier, competition between the hotels.
So then as an owner, if I owned one of those branded condo units, do I get like a closet I can keep my personal stuff in, or like how does that work?
It kind of just depends.
Okay. I've never really understood how
this
that
isn't
works.
A beach house though, Dan. This isn't like your owner's closet at a beach house. Like, it's not like, you're locking up that type of stuff. We're talking about like, 500 square feet of space.
Yeah, I'd love to keep a toothbrush or a change of clothes in there,
Okay.
or some dental floss.
There you go. Full circle. There you go.
A full circle. That was not intentional, but I like that. All right. Well, hey, Alex, this has been freaking amazing. I can't wait to see you. If people want to learn more about you or Design Agency, how do they get in touch?
Yeah, definitely shoot me an email or you can go to our website.
Okay, cool. And we'll also put your LinkedIn up there as well.
Yes,
Okay,
though
cool.
don't send me a message, shoot me an email.
Yeah. Um, well, hey, I know you're so busy. I know that you're like, even though you say you're not in all places at all times, you are. So I want to say thank you for your time. I'm so grateful and appreciative of that. And also our friendship, because not only for dental hygiene, but just life in general, you like, I don't know, I just love seeing you everywhere and you inspire me to get out and have fun. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. This has been a great pleasure.
Oh yeah. And also I want to thank our listeners, because again, we keep growing every week. And I know it's not me, it's the guests like Alex and everyone else. I think people are really intrigued by hospitality, how that it affects life and business and the built environment. So if this has changed your perspective or helped you get an idea for something, please pass it along to someone. It's all been word of mouth. And I'm just very humbled by the continued growth. And I just want to say thank you again. And thank you to everyone out there. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.